The baby boomers, born between 1946 and 1964. They came of age during unprecedented prosperity, bought houses for the price of a new car today, and are now sitting on mountains of wealth while younger generations struggle to afford rent. They had it easy, pulled the ladder up behind them, and now lecture millennials and Gen Z about avocado toast and work ethic. Right? Well, not exactly. Today, we are going to challenge one of the internet's favorite punching bags and ask whether the generational wealth divide is actually about generations at all, or something much bigger and more troubling. Let's dive in. Here's what we know. Gen Z is falling behind. By almost every measurable milestone: homeownership, marriage rates, starting families, financial security, they're worse off than their parents were at the same age. The numbers are stark. Millennials now hold just 4.6% of U.S. wealth, despite making up over 20% of the population. When boomers were the same age, they controlled twice that share. Gen Z is starting even further behind. Housing costs have exploded. In 1970, the median home price was about 2.5 times the median household income. Today, it's over 5 times. Student debt has ballooned from practically nothing to a $1.7 trillion crisis. Real wages for young workers have stagnated while productivity has soared. So yeah, the kids aren't all right. And it's easy, natural even, to look at the generation sitting on all that wealth and point fingers. But here's the problem with that narrative. It's not wrong, it's just incomplete. And that incompleteness is hiding a much more important truth. First, let's talk about why generations are kind of nonsense as economic categories. Millennials were supposedly born between 1981 and 1996. That's 15 years. Someone born in 1981 graduated college before 9/11 and entered the workforce during the dot-com boom. Someone born in 1996 was 12 during the financial crisis and graduated into a pandemic. Did they have the same economic experience? It's obviously not. These cutoffs are almost completely arbitrary, just lines drawn in the sand for convenience. The only exception is the boomers themselves, whose label actually refers to the very real baby boom after World War II. But even then, being born in 1946 versus 1964 meant radically different childhoods, economic conditions, and opportunities. Using generations to analyze economics is dangerously close to astrology. And worse, it distracts us from the real problems. Because here's what the generational framing misses. There are plenty of boomers who are broke. There are plenty of millennials who are wealthy. The real divide isn't between generations, it's within them. Let me give you a jaw-dropping statistic. Almost half of the boomer generation's collective net worth is held by about 20 people. 20 people. Jeff Bezos, born 1964. Bill Gates, born 1955. When we talk about how wealthy the boomers are, we re-averaging in literal billionaires, with people working retail at 70 because Social Security does uncover rent. The same dynamic is playing out with millennials right now. Yes, millennials are about to become the wealthiest generation in history, but that wealth is absurdly concentrated. Mark Zuckerberg's net worth drags up the average for millions of millennials drowning in student debt. This is an inequality story, not a generational one. Inequality has been rising steadily since the 1970s. The Gini coefficient, wealth concentration, real wages versus productivity, pick your metric. They all tell the same story. The rich have gotten much, much richer, while everyone else has treaded water or fallen behind. This happened to effect during a time when boomers were entering their peak earning years and accumulating assets. But a Gen Z kid born into wealth is benefiting just as much as any boomer billionaire. The problem isn't age, it's who owns what. So why does it feel so generational? Because of timing. The last 50 years have been phenomenal for asset owners and brutal for workers. If you owned a house, stocks, or a business, you did great. If you only had your labor to sell, you got squeezed. Boomers entered the workforce and bought homes during a period when housing was affordable. Unions were strong and middle-class wages were rising. They accumulated assets when the getting was good. Then, starting in the 1980s, everything shifted. Union power collapsed. Financialization took over the economy. Housing became an investment vehicle instead of just a place to live. Corporate profits soared, while worker compensation stagnated. By the time millennials and Gen Z entered the workforce, the game had changed. Assets were expensive, wages were stagnant, and debt was everywhere. Student loans, once rare, became standard. Consumer credit exploded. Even things like buy now, pay later services have created what economists call phantom debt, liabilities that aren't even properly counted in the statistics. So younger generations started further behind, with more debt, competing for jobs that pay less in real terms, trying to buy assets that cost more. And yes, many of those assets are owned by boomers, but that's a symptom, not the cause. Here's another wrinkle. We're materially better off in many ways than previous generations. Think about it. In the 1960s, overseas travel was a luxury only the rich could afford. Dishwashers, color TVs, air conditioning, these were serious purchases. Today, college students backpack across Europe on a shoestring budget, and a smartphone has more computing power than NASA used to land on the moon. We have access to information, entertainment, and convenience that would have seemed like science fiction 50 years ago. Life expectancy is higher. Medical technology is better. We have options and opportunities that simply didn't exist. But here's the catch. Luxuries got cheaper while essentials got more expensive. You can buy a 55-inch TV for $300, but a studio apartment in most cities costs $2,000 a month. You can stream unlimited music for $10, but a college degree costs $100,000. We have material abundance in consumer goods, but scarcity in the things that actually matter for long-term stability: housing, education, healthcare, and being always connected with smartphones. Great for productivity. Also means you're never really off work, never truly disconnected. That quality of life hit doesn't show up in GDP statistics. Now here's the biggest point, the one that often gets ignored in these generational debates. The last 50 years haven't just been good for wealthy people in the West. They've also been incredible for the global poor. Extreme poverty worldwide has plummeted. Billions of people in China, India, Southeast Asia, and beyond have moved from subsistence farming to modern industrial economies. Lives that would have been virtually medieval 50 years ago now include education, healthcare, and economic mobility. This is genuinely one of humanity's greatest achievements. But it came with a cost, and much of that cost was borne by the middle class in advanced economies. Jobs got outsourced, manufacturing moved overseas. Globalization created winners and losers, and a lot of the losers were the working and middle classes in the US, Europe, and other developed nations. So the wealth didn't just concentrate upward within countries, it also redistributed globally. That's probably a net positive for humanity as a whole. But locally, in places like Rust Belt America or post-industrial Britain, it caused enormous pain. Was it worth it? That's a moral and political question, not just an economic one. But it's crucial context that gets lost when we reduce everything to boomers versus millennials. So, are boomers the most selfish generation in history? No. They're not uniquely selfish, they're not uniquely lucky, and they're not a monolith. The wealthiest boomers have far more in common with wealthy millennials and Gen Z than they do with broke boomers working into their 70s. The real story isn't generational conflict, it's class conflict. It's about how wealth concentrates over time in market economies without intervention. It's about the shift from an economy that rewarded labor to one that rewards capital. It's about political power flowing toward the wealthy and away from workers, regardless of age. The generational framing is emotionally satisfying. It gives us someone to blame, a neat narrative, good engagement on social media. But it distracts us from the actual problem. runaway inequality. Because here's the thing, Gen Z will eventually inherit wealth and become the richest generation in history, just like millennials are now. But if inequality keeps growing, that wealth will be even more concentrated and even more people will be left behind. The answer isn't to pit generations against each other. It's to recognize that the system is working exactly as designed, funneling wealth upward and leaving everyone else fighting over scraps. If we want to fix this, we need to stop blaming the olds or the youngs and start asking harder questions about power, wealth, and who our economy is actually built to serve. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think. Is this a generational issue or something bigger? See you next time.